The open ocean. A tall black fin appears right next to the boat. Beneath the surface glides a predator weighing several tons, capable of killing a seal with a single strike and taking down a massive shark. For a human, an encounter like this should feel like a death sentence. However, a wild killer whale usually just cruises by, checks out the strange object, and fades back into the deep. There are absolutely no reliably documented cases of a killer whale in the wild intentionally killing a human being. Why does one of the most powerful predators in the ocean almost never view us as food? First off, it is important to separate capability from intent. A killer whale is physically capable of severely injuring a person with barely any effort. But just because they have the power does not mean they have the urge to attack. Out in the wild, predators are way more selective when it comes to picking their prey. Killer whales are actually the largest members of the dolphin family. Fully grown males can reach lengths of over 30 feet and weigh around 6 tons. These marine mammals are incredibly fast, highly agile, and packed with large conical teeth. Depending on the pod, these animals hunt fish, seals, dolphins, seabirds, sharks, and even massive whales. At first glance, a human seems like the perfect size for a meal. However, a killer whale does not choose its diet based solely on how big the available animal happens to be. Most predators do not just go around taste testing every single creature they bump into. Making a mistake could lead to an injury, poisoning, or a complete waste of energy. Because of this, they rely on shape, movement, sounds, reactions, and past experiences to figure out what is actually on the menu. For orcas, this selection process is incredibly strict. Specific pods stick to a certain type of prey for generations and completely ignore other options, even if they are right next to them. Groups that eat fish usually do not switch to seals, and those that hunt mammals rarely go after fish. These differences are known as dietary specialization. It comes down to learning just as much as biology. An orca family passes down its diet almost like a deeply rooted tradition. Humans simply are not part of that tradition. Our silhouette, movements, and behavior do not match the familiar profile of prey that the animal learns to recognize from a very young age. This explanation makes a lot more sense than the idea that humans just taste bad. There is no real way to test the taste theory anyway, since wild orcas almost never try to eat us. They do not need to taste a person first to decide against hunting them. An orca gathers a great deal of information long before it even gets close. They have excellent underwater vision, they can hear movements, and they use echolocation. Short clicks bounce off an object and help them figure out the distance, direction, shape, and exactly how that object is moving. A swimmer in a wetsuit is unlikely to look like a regular seal to an orca just because of a visual resemblance. An onlooker might mix up the two silhouettes from above, but the animal investigates the target using several senses at once and notices the differences in movement. Orcas can recognize familiar individuals, coordinate complex hunts, and change their actions based on the reaction of their prey. This kind of advanced control keeps them from automatically lunging at every moving object that happens to be nearby. Intelligence does not prove kindness in this case. An orca has no obligation to consciously spare a human being. Its advanced perception simply helps it accurately classify the object it encounters and choose a behavior that fits the specific situation, rather than just automatically attacking. Sometimes the animal gets extremely close to a swimmer. A curious orca can follow along, roll over on its side, and examine a person with one eye. It might touch an object with its snout or create a wave nearby. This is terrifying for an observer, even though no attack actually happens. You can tell the difference by looking at their sequence of actions. When hunting, killer whales speed up, surround their target, cut off any escape routes, and use a proven capture method. When checking out an unfamiliar object, their movements are usually slow, cautious, and stop short of an actual bite. However, it is also a mistake to assume that every encounter is perfectly safe. A massive animal could accidentally strike a person, flip a small boat, or just get a little too carried away while interacting.
Just because they are not actively hunting does not negate the sheer bulk, speed, and unpredictable nature of a wild predator.
Experts strongly advise against approaching killer whales on your own, trying to touch them, or offering them food. Keeping a respectful distance protects everyone involved, as it prevents the animals from learning to associate humans with a free meal or overly pushy interactions. The whole issue gets a bit more complicated when you factor in a few rare incidents. There have been documented cases where a wild orca actually bit someone, nudged a surfboard, or swam right up to a swimmer at an alarming speed. However, these episodes were never followed up by an attempt to press the attack or actually eat the victim. One of the most frequently brought up cases involves a surfer who was bitten on the leg by a killer whale that immediately let go. It is impossible to figure out exactly why it happened. It could have been a case of mistaken identity, an exploratory nibble, or just a reaction to something unusual in the water. A single bite is not enough to claim that the animal mistook a person for prey. When hunting their usual target, orcas typically keep up the chase. In known incidents involving humans, this sequence of events has simply not been observed. It is especially important not to confuse wild ocean encounters with tragedies that happen in captivity. At marine parks, orcas have severely injured people, and several incidents have even ended in the deaths of trainers. These are very real situations that require their own separate explanation. In an artificial pool, the animal has no way to leave, pick its companions, or swim the vast distances it normally would. They can be forced to live right next to individuals from completely different populations, animals that would never form a stable social group together out in the wild. Confined spaces, a repetitive daily routine, conflicts, and constant contact with humans can easily lead to chronic stress. Some captive orcas have been observed suffering from severe tooth damage, repetitive pacing behaviors, apathy, and direct aggression toward people. This does not mean that every single orca in a marine park is guaranteed to attack a person. However, the conditions of captivity are so drastically different from the open ocean that applying the behavior of a captive animal to wild orca populations is simply scientifically incorrect. There is also the opposite mistake, assuming that the lack of attacks proves killer whales have some special love for humanity. We have no idea what the animal actually thinks of us. Science can describe observed behavior, but it cannot read their intentions directly. Most likely, a human is just an unusual large object to a killer whale. Some individuals show interest, others keep their distance, and some just swim right by. This kind of varied reaction is nothing like the usual attitude of a predator toward familiar prey. There might be another reason for this kind of restraint. Killer whale hunting requires precise skills and carries risks. Even for a powerful predator, it makes more sense to go after familiar prey whose behavior is predictable and whose nutritional value is already known. A human swims slowly, but behaves in an unusual way, is often covered in gear, and is frequently found near a boat. For the animal, this is a whole mix of unfamiliar signals. A cautious investigation is probably a lot smarter than an immediate attempt to grab the target. On top of that, killer whales learn by watching their pod members. If the adults do not hunt humans, the calves never see an example of an attack, nor do they see how to process that kind of prey. As a result, the next generation never develops that specific skill either. This idea makes more sense when you compare different populations. Down in Patagonia, young killer whales spend years learning how to beach themselves to catch sea lions. Over in Antarctica, other families master the art of making waves that wash seals right off the ice floes. None of these complex techniques develop simply because an orca gets hungry. The animal needs observation, practice, and help from experienced relatives. Hunting is a cultural skill, and humans are not included in any known training system. Even the attitude toward a single type of prey can vary. Some groups hunt down sharks and eat their fatty livers, while others pay almost no attention to sharks at all. Food availability alone does not force every community to pick the exact same menu. The question itself is better phrased differently. It is not about why an orca passes up an obvious meal, but why it should even consider a human as prey in the first place. For an animal raised on salmon or seals, there's absolutely nothing obvious about it. A popular explanation is sometimes tied to the idea that orcas supposedly understand human intelligence and see us as equals. There is no solid proof for this idea. The ability to distinguish between objects does not mean recognizing the intellect or special status of others. The theory of an ancient pact between our species remains unproven as well. In certain areas, orcas actually did team up with fishermen and whalers. However, a local, mutually beneficial experience cannot explain the behavior of every population across all oceans. Near the Australian town of Eden, orcas helped whalers find and corral large whales. After the hunt, the animals were left with the tongue and lips of the carcass. This cooperation shows their ability to learn, but it does not prove a universal fondness for humans. Orcas can remember specific boats, routes, and human behavior patterns. In some regions, they calmly follow fishermen, while in others, they avoid vessels. The experience of a single family pod can influence its reaction more strongly than simply belonging to the species. Since the year 2020, near the Iberian Peninsula, some orcas started interacting with sailboats and damaging their rudders. Hundreds of incidents sparked talk of revenge, yet no evidence of a deliberate war against humans has ever surfaced. The animals focus primarily on the rudder area of the vessel and usually make no attempt to reach the crew. Researchers discuss playfulness, curiosity, excitement, and social imitation as possible motives. The exact reason for this behavior remains unknown for now. These encounters show that a lack of interest in hunting humans does not mean complete indifference to our objects. An orca might investigate a boat, break off pieces of it, and create a dangerous situation without ever viewing the people inside as food. It is important to distinguish between a predatory attack, a defensive reaction, and simple interaction with an object. For a person, the outcome of any encounter can be severe. However, to truly understand the behavior of the animal, the underlying motive, and the sequence of events, are absolutely crucial. Defensive aggression in the wild is certainly possible if an animal is cornered, injured, or worried about a calf being too close. However, most encounters with killer whales happen in open water, where they can simply swim away and avoid a conflict altogether. When hunting, killer whales conserve their energy, assign specific roles, and call off the chase if the risk becomes too high. A human typically offers them neither a familiar source of food nor any good reason to keep up a dangerous interaction. There is one more factor that is hard to measure accurately: the history of contact between our species. Humans have been sailing through killer whale habitats for thousands of years. Even if rare attacks did happen far away from any witnesses, there is virtually no reliable data left about them. Making an absolute statement that a wild orca has never killed a human would be a bit of a stretch. It is more accurate to say that science does not yet have a reliably confirmed case of a killer whale in the wild intentionally hunting a human with fatal results. This careful wording does not weaken the main point. People regularly swim, dive, fish, and work in the oceans, where orcas live. Given the massive number of potential encounters, the lack of confirmed hunting truly seems unusual. Observations point to several mechanisms at play here. Orcas accurately identify objects, stick to a very specific diet, learn how to hunt from their relatives, and avoid unnecessary risks. Together, these traits make a random change in their diet highly unlikely. At the same time, each of these points has its limits. Celery, 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 celery. This also does not guarantee that their behavior will stay the same forever. Orcas pick up new habits, react to environmental changes, and copy the actions of their peers. The rarity of attacks describes the known history of our encounters, but it does not promise safety in every future situation. Their usual restraint does not mean that close contact is safe. When you run into them, you should never chase the animals, block their path, or try to lure them with food. Keeping your distance reduces the risk of an unpredictable reaction from both sides. The less people interfere, the lower the chances of a defensive reaction, an accidental collision, or the animals getting used to boats. Quiet observation lets you see the orca for what it truly is: a powerful wild predator with its own mind and boundaries. Perhaps what surprises us the most is not the lack of attacks, but our own expectation of one. We see their teeth, their massive size, and their hunting capabilities, and then we automatically assume the animal wants to use them against any creature it crosses paths with. Ozen comes the nester. And the most But a predator does not have to be aggressive all the time. Its success depends on its ability to tell prey apart, pick the right moment, and avoid wasting energy for no reason. When it comes to orcas, this selective nature is backed up by memory, learning, and family traditions. An encounter between a human and a wild orca usually ends without an attack. not because of some magical friendship or our own strength. To them, we are most likely just not something they are used to hunting.